After Orion Oliver's rounds in the desert, he found himself suddenly plunged into the froth of the foaming sea. There was something undeniably attractive about the seaside. When he wrote home about it, Orion mentioned the largeness of the ocean, the roaring sound, the smell of salt in the air, and left out the scantily clad, leggy women of the local college that lined the shore. He most definitely forgot to mention those same women sneaking him into their boarding house to imbibe in the no illegal bottles of wine. By now, he was getting used to the lively evenings to his droll photographic days. Orion was charming. There wasn't any way out of that. It was difficult to even consider giving up exciting conversation with strangers, or the thrill of catching a certain look in someone's eyes. Each new town, city, or settlement opened itself wide with opportunity. Photographer needed for a christening or a wedding, or, as it came to be, one fine day, a traveling circus. It was a world of color that Orion had never seen. Wheels and games, punching strong men and fat ladies selling costumes, ringmasters and their performing clowns, women who could talk to the dead, dancing forest sprites, and the tall men stirring mysterious pots. Of course, Orion was quartered to a red and white tent to photograph enthralled circus goers on their best day out. Laughing children, the smell of popcorn and candies cooking, all just outside the walls. He couldn't complain, it was all right money. And with most of his extra cash being sent to the farm, Orion needed it. But after a few weeks of popcorn suppers and idle chatter, that need to collect came again. This time it pranced in the form of Tree Spirit. He made her an offering, as one does, and found himself back where he was used to, gently prying at the story and gossip of truly lived life. Orion found that the costumed woman who danced around the circus in her garb of foliage was named Maggie. He learned from her that life was not all cotton fluff and magic, but full of circus-centered hierarchy, interpersonal dramatics, and heartbreak. Like many, Maggie had been born to the nomadic life of entertainment, and while she wanted to hear even a little of what a slow farm life had been like, Orion, as usual, kept her talking of herself. She would have liked a normal life, she said when he asked her to tell him more. She would have liked parents, siblings, mundanity. Orion almost said he would have as well, but kept that to himself. By the end of their encounter on the beach, when he asked if he could take her portrait, he knew exactly how he'd pose her, as Maggie, not the dancing tree spirit. At the end of another adventure, Orion Oliver trekked himself further up the coastline. This time he was chasing a rumor rather than fate. One rather rainy afternoon in a rather old-fashioned Victorian cafe, he heard talk of a man who was riding his bicycle across the whole of the country twice over. What had begun as a childhood tendency of eavesdropping had grown into a bad habit. Orion liked to hear the chatter of strangers in stranger places as he licked his wandering wounds. Mostly it was gossip or pleasantries, but he liked the thought of catching a glimpse of a madman on a bicycle. With just a bit of prying, he heard where the man was headed and went there himself. He had time to wander, to take a portrait of an authoress, catch a photograph of a child getting caught stealing a Sunday lunch, time to develop his photographs in the small-town photo finishers, and especially time to be rejected by a particularly beautiful client who thought him quite the needlesome fellow. Orion caught the man by chance, just as the stranger had slowed his infamous bicycle to a stop. The man's name was Gordon Bybee, not a particularly romantic name, but such is the way of things. It didn't take much work at all. No, tell me mores. The fellow was practically bursting to tell his story, and Orion was bursting to hear it. It was not twice, but the fourth time Gordon had biked from one end of the country to the other. He did it because he was taking a stand, said Gordon. Despite the few years between them, Gordon had been overseas. He'd seen the front of those French trenches, and he'd stayed to see the aftermath. He wrote for peace in the plight of the forgotten soldiers. Bybee lived off of the will of his uninjured body and the kindness of strangers. Orion didn't quite understand this kind of protest or activism, but he didn't need to. When Bybee asked Orion if he was a journalist and said that not one journalist had sought him out, Orion found himself saying he was. And the idea was settled. This was an interview, and Orion was the interviewer. He took Mr. Bybee back to Miss Emmeline's boarding house for a meal and some rest. The woman was thrilled to have two young men at her table again and spent the evening talking of the days of her youth. As far as Orion's short-stay tenancy went, he was polite, conversational, and found himself convincing the old woman to put on that dress she never got to wear in her youth. He photographed her looking oddly and suddenly young. And when Bybee departed, so did he. And as he promised, Orion Oliver sent that story in to the papers.